to introduce our next speaker. He is a gentleman that I have known since I was about 14 years old, and he was a mentor to me, not only as teaching me a good work ethic, but also mentored me in politics. And I really, really appreciate this gentleman. He is our governor, our previous governor, and Governor Batt was born in Wilder, Idaho in 1927 and became the 29th governor of the state of Idaho. And he served as our governor from 1995 to 1999. Governor Batt was an onion and hops farmer from Wilder, Idaho. He is a longtime Republican and served in the Idaho legislature, House of Representatives from 1965 to 1967, and the Idaho Senate from 1967 and 1979, and was the 35th Lieutenant Governor of Idaho from 1979 to 1983. Governor Batt defeated Democratic candidate State Attorney General Larry Echohawk in the general election. Despite an 80% approval rating, Mr. Batt chose to serve only one term. Among Mr. Batt's more notable accomplishments as governor were pushing through workers' compensation insurance for agricultural workers and negotiating a pact limiting the storage of nuclear waste in Idaho. During his term, Idaho's cabinet had the highest percentage of women than any other state. He also assisted with legislation to provide portable toilets to our farm workers in the state of Idaho. And it is my honor and my privilege to present Governor Batt.
Thank you, Stella. Is this going? Yeah, it is. Thank you, Stella. I'm 85 years old, so this camp I was 12 years old, I guess, when they first established the housing authority here. And it's been a marvelous addition to our community, a very valuable one during all those years. I'm an old man, and I've had a lot of things happen to me. Many good ones. I've been awfully lucky. Some bad. I'm not going to talk about those today. But one of the most important, one of the luckiest things that ever happened to me, I believe, is I've been mixed up with a lot of people of a lot of different races over the years, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. My best friend when I was farming early was a Japanese American, Kainui. His brother-in-law, Jimmy Mata, was relocated from Portland, and I don't know whether he went through here or not, but evidently there were a lot of Japanese Americans here. In fact, I read in your book that there about half the camp was Japanese Americans at the end of the war. So it's got a long history to it. In more recent years, my best friend has been Richard Cortez from Boise, of the Idaho Metal Products Company up there. He passed on now, but he and I were very close friends. We used to talk together all the time, pray together and everything. He was a fine man and did a lot for Hispanics in the schools. But as Stella mentioned, I've had a long political career, and a lot of it was mainly concentrating on fiscal matters, but some of it also was in the field of civil rights. I was proudly the author of Idaho's first comprehensive civil rights law, with the formation of the Human Rights Commission at that time. And Stella now is the chairman of that commission, and has been for many years, or has helped out on it for many years. She has a long history of advancing good causes in Idaho. She mentioned that I was instrumental in helping get some field toilets out. I always had them on my farm. I didn't ever think a woman had to walk a quarter of a mile to squat down in a ditch to relieve herself. So we got those in, and we also passed, as she mentioned, Idaho's requirement that workers' comp be carried by all farm workers, or farmers. I carried it voluntarily all my farming life. My success in farming was due to a lot of luck and a lot of factors, but mainly it was due to the output of my employees, many of whom were Hispanic and were of various races. I had a profit-sharing plan. 3 of my Hispanic employees were involved in that, and we made a lot of money, and they got part of it, which they should have. But I'm thankful very much to my employees. I'm thankful to this camp or this housing authority which housed some of them, and I appreciate all of what you've done and appreciate your reunion here today. And I understand you're going to have a 75th one in a few years. I hope to come out to that if I'm still living. Thank you, Stella.
Good, good. I see some friendly faces up here. Mr. Julio Peña, a Vietnam veteran, Marine, and also a former state trooper in this great state of Idaho. I want to introduce now Eloise Ward. She grew up in Wyoming and applied for a teaching job while visiting NYSA, Idaho. She taught in NYSA 2 years, where she met and married her husband, Conley Ward, and later moved on to Notice, Idaho, to farm on Black Canyon project. She began teaching at Washington School in Caldwell, and she was asked by the Idaho Farm Workers Migrant Council to apply for a job as a Child Development Program Coordinator at the Caldwell Labor Camp. As a 5th grade teacher, she often taught migrant students in the late spring and early fall. She always felt guilty that she couldn't do enough to help the migrant students, but this was her chance to help. She started summer programs at the labor camp, but regretted that she could only spend summers and weekends at the labor camp. I'd like to welcome Miss Eloise Ward, please.
Okay, I'll see if I can handle this thing. First, I'm Eloise Ward. First, I'd like to introduce my daughter and her husband, Kay Ingley. You've got a little bit of my history, but as a 5th grade teacher, I did always feel like I didn't do enough for those students that came a little time in the spring and a little time in the fall. So when I got a chance to direct the program that was just starting here, the camp council had gotten a federal grant to start a child development center here. So anyway, when I got the chance, I decided that that was my chance to pay back to these people that I'd always admired. So I came out to the camp and I met with Lou Kerfoot, and he was the camp manager then, and he was wonderful and agreed to help all he could. But he suggested that I talk to Rose Archuleta. What a wonderful woman she was. She turned out to be my helper, my go-between between the camp people. She lived here, and she knew everybody, and she was as interested as I was in seeing the project succeed. We had, when I asked about the facilities, there was the big building here, and part of you will remember. It had a big gymnasium. It had 3 rooms that could be used as classrooms. It had 2 bathrooms, and it had a kitchen, and a big room in the back, which we later used as a nursery. It was originally a bakery, I was told, but anyway, we used that as a nursery. I insisted that we have, try to get a permit to have care for the infants, because I felt like if the infants had to go to the car and stay with the mothers, then a lot of the older children would too. So we did get a permit to keep the infants. And Rose was in charge of that, and she did a wonderful job. She always had at least 2 bilingual aides to help her. I did hire a staff of teachers. They did not all speak English, so our bilingual aides were just essential. And I give them credit for a lot of the success of the project was the bilingual aides. They were wonderful. The project succeeded only because the parents were so cooperative, so appreciative, and I was always amazed that when they came to pick up their children in the evenings, they would welcome them with a big hug and be so happy to see their children, but they never left without saying thank you to us, and by us I mean the staff for helping them. The project, we had the facilities of the gymnasium, and we did have an outdoor play area, but that gymnasium was our play area. But it was also the place where the children could take a nap in the afternoon, and I had ordered those canvas stack cots, and they had little blankets or a little towel or a little blankie if they needed one. And so anyway, when volunteers would come, they were always volunteers and guests, I should say, and people that just wanted to come and see what was happening. They would come generally in the afternoon. Well, we had all our classes in the morning, and in the afternoon the teachers would read the children a story while the aides would set out all those little cots. And we started out with 50 cots, and very soon I had to order 100. So 50 more, so we had 100. But to see all those little cots in the gymnasium with all those little children asleep on them at one time was just a really wonderful sight. And I did bring a little article from the Idaho Observer that showed the little kids in the cots, and I thought some of you would enjoy seeing that. But that always impressed the people that we could get them to all go to sleep at one time like that. It was a very wonderful experience for me. I learned a lot. I thought it was a happy time in my life to work with a different group of people than I had worked with before, and I learned to love and care for them, and thought that was a wonderful time for me, as well as the learning time, and I thought we did a good job.
Okay, we'll continue with our program now. We'd also like to introduce Miss Phyllis Stimper. She was born in Caldwell, Idaho, in the old Memorial Hospital, which is now the BPOE house. She's the child of Fred and Nara Foster of Caldwell. She graduated from Caldwell High School and received her bachelor's and master's of arts degree from the College of Idaho. She was an elementary teacher for 36 years and served on the Idaho Education Association board, and was named Teacher of the Year, President of the Caldwell Education Association, and served on the Migrant Ministry Committee. She is currently enjoying volunteering half days as a reading specialist at Lincoln School and enjoys spending time with her granddaughter, Rihanna. May I ask for Miss Phyllis Stimper to come forward, please.
Thank you very much. I have had a wonderful time out here today. I have seen so many faces that are familiar to me. One thing I want to know is, are any of the science kids here? Obed? I need Obed. I need a hug from Obed. Other science kids. Okay. Next year will be my 50th year of working and volunteering with Caldwell School District. claps for living that long. I probably worked with the children of many of the people in this group today. They have given me laughter and joy along the way. For instance, last year, as a volunteer, I was discussing how all birds are alike with a group of second language second graders. They decided that all birds had noses and that all birds had hands. Really. But the topper to that discussion was their announcement that all birds have shoes. Made my day. I told them I was going outside and find those birds who were wearing shoes. Another day, that same group was discussing some complicated question, and finally, after much talk, but not much progress, I asked, does anybody know the answer? And the little boy looked at me seriously and said, you do? Good thing, huh? I first came out to Farmway, then known as the Caldwell Labor Camp, early in my teaching career. I was so impressed with the feeling of community and the eagerness of the parents to help their children do well in school. And over time, I have visited here in many capacities, many of them as a representative of the Caldwell Migrant Ministry. From 1948 until 1973, young men in this country were drafted into the armed services. There were many young men whose religious beliefs were against serving in an army, and the country allowed those young men to serve their country in what was known as alternative service. The Napoli Church of the Brethren was the coordinator for that type of service in Canyon County, and volunteers from several different churches worked on that committee. I represented Faith Lutheran Church, not since 1948. From 1948 to 1973, several young couples chose to do alternative service out here at the camp. They lived in House 3 and helped in many ways. They helped people with the red tape of medical service, court appearances, driver's licenses, and interceded with many other community resources. They also worked with the children, taught classes in various subjects such as cooking, and sewing, and budgeting, and healthy eating. But in 1973, the draft was discontinued and our supply of willing young volunteers came to an end. At this point, the Migrant Ministry Committee worked to fill this gap with local volunteers and local donations. One of the things they were very interested in was the library. We provided volunteers who helped in the library and collected books for the use of the children. One of the gals that I had in first grade, Diana, told me today that they were never allowed to take those books home from the library. I wish I had known that at the time. Some local teachers also came out and held classes in the evening for the children, and later Sister Bernadette came out. We also wrote grants and for several years ran a summer daycare program. One of the wonderful people who worked with us on that was Rose Archuleta, a dear friend of mine. The Migrant Ministry provided the cots, probably the same cots that Eloise used, to nap on in the heat of the day, and I recall at that time buying several dozen light blankets, cutting them into fourths, hemming them around the edges, and putting them on those little cots so they weren't so sticky and hot. Once the volunteers were no longer here, and that would be in 1973, the Migrant Ministry focus became providing programs themselves. It was a long, long trip at the end of the day for parents to be able to get their kids into town to programs. So for a few years, I drove out here 3 times a week to work with the children I had come to love so much. I had a boys' night in the gym and a girls' night in the gym where we often played a version of basketball called Horse. I also had a small program in House 3 where I taught a little cooking and a little crafts one night a week to the girls. One of my favorite memories of those evenings is that the boys would keep hanging around and try to see the girls and try to distract the girls and try to annoy the girls. And the little science boys were a big part of that. However, what was amazing was how Nelda Sines, the older sister, whip them into shape and send them packing so the girls could enjoy their evening. Many of the parents of the girls were hesitant to let their girls participate in the gym program and return home in the dark. So I promised that I would see them home, I would drive them home every evening when we were finished. I know one of the mamas that was worried about that was Mrs. Flores, and I saw I saw Aurelia here today. Aurelia was part, and Celia were both part of that program that I ran back then. The boys, however, were allowed to just return home on their own. Back in those days, there was an electrical box way back against the furthest back wall of the gym. And it turned off all the electricity in the building, so every night that I was in the gym, I had to pull the electrical switch, then walk through the gym, down the halls, out the back door, and through the playground to the parking lot with only a flashlight to see by. One night my boy said, "We're leaving now, miss." And I said, "No, you aren't. You are going to stay and walk out with me." One of the boys said in a spooky voice, "Yes, miss, I hear there are dead guys in here." And I told them that it wasn't the dead guys I was worrying about. After a while, my friend Gabe Manzanares took over the boys program, and I focused on just the girls program. I also taught summer school for the school district during that time, and took groups of boys and other groups of girls up to Idaho City a couple of summers. And I worked with Tom Moore and Von Heinrich, and we taught water study, and we had great fun. At night we sat around the campfire and sang camp songs. And Tom Moore, and I don't know if any of you remember Tom Moore, but Tom would tell stories about bears and cougars, which certainly made those kids hot-footed back to the cabins when the campfire was over. One more story. One day at summer school, my very tan 4-year-old Sam, who was attending summer school too, came out of the boys' bathroom, walked up to me, and with his eyes wide said, "Mommy, some of the boys in there are brown all over." I have some very, very fond memories of those years and the kids I worked with and the parents who entrusted me.
Well, that was great stories. We received a call, and her hellos to everybody here, and to thank the committee from one of the generations of Luis and Maria Valdez. Recording artist Leti Gubal sends you her saludos. And now we're going to have Miss Betty Hardwick. Miss Betty Hardwick began work for the Caldwell Bus Company in the fall of 1972. And now the driver recommended to the company manager that Betty drive the labor camp route because he thought she would like it. She liked it. She drove the labor camp school bus for 29 years. Once the school district began providing kindergarten, she drove 5 routes a day to and from the labor camp. When she retired in 2001, she was beginning to see the third generations of residents on her school bus. These were her kids, and she says she loved driving their bus. Can I introduce to you Mrs. Betty Hardwick, please?
Hello, everybody. Forgive me if I can't remember names. My mouth never could twist around the Spanish language, and I always slaughtered your names. So I concentrated on your faces and where you lived, so I could get you home, get you to school and home safely. But I may not recognize all of you because you have changed a lot, and maybe me too. I started driving in August of 1972, almost 40 years ago to the day. I started as a beginner in Bus 11. It was an old 1959 GMC. And as the years went by, the buses changed, the bus numbers changed to 27, 29, and 7. All of them had stick shift. Del Saville, I don't know if anyone is here that remembered him. He was a very experienced driver, so he got stuck teaching me. And together we drove the labor camp route. After the first year, the kids were my kids. 2 morning routes and 2 afternoon routes for $7 a day. In 1977, the state of Idaho funded public kindergarten. So then I was driving 5 routes a day, and I got a whole 50 cents a day raise. I remember some of the little kindergartners were so shy and frightened first days of school, but one little boy really stands out. He had apparently had other family members that had ridden my bus, and he was well prepared. Full of confidence, he stomped up the bus steps with a really strong voice and said, "Hi, Betty." So I thought, okay, this one's not going to be a problem. Maybe. One of the requirements of the school and to transport kids' buses was emergency evacuation drills. I was always so very proud of my kids because even with the supposed language barrier, we completed the exercises at the top of all the other buses because the Farmway kids listened and had pride in doing it right. I didn't believe in or ever said, "Shut up," to my kids. Only, "Sit down," in my sweet, soft voice. Because the kid or kids causing the problems were always up, jumping over seats, running down the aisle, or head out the window. But once the bottom hit the seat and the mouth went closed, just like magic. No, you weren't perfect, but overall, you were the best. I also drove summer school all those years and night school into Nampa's West Junior High and South Junior High. The classes were for older students, like home economics and English, for several years. Jesus De Leon rode with me during night classes and acted as translator and became a good friend. After the first year, I chose to drive Farmer Village for the next 28 years. I drove over 1 million miles, most of them in a yellow school bus, before I retired June 3rd, 2001. So I'm 77 years old, still have my hearing, my eyesight, and hopefully my sense of humor. School bus drivers transport the most valuable cargo in the world, your children. Thank you for inviting me.
It is beautiful to have all these people, these beautiful educators that strives a lot of our people to continue their education and be what they are. You know, the sky's the limit, and we have a lot of people that can help you. I know we have present here one of our valedictorians from 1983, and we'd like to give her a recognition. Marcela? Isn't that nice? I remember when I went into the service and I filled out paperwork in the induction center, and I saw where education came in, and I wrote down 12 years of education. No, take it back. It was 13 years of education. And no high school diploma, no years in college. So they asked me to come forward and answer to that paperwork. Well, I told the gentleman the reason I was there, it was because I had to stay in different grades throughout my education career because I didn't have enough grades or time in school because I was a migrant worker. So I went back to the 7th grade. I think it was 3 or 4 times and never get out of there. 2nd grade and 5th grade were the same way. Well, I told the guy this is the reason I have that many years in school. So, thank you to my wife, my lovely wife Nina, here present. When I came back from Vietnam, she encouraged me to go to school and get my education, and I did because she's a wonderful lady, my backbone, my right shoulder. She's everything to me. And finally, we have to turn everyone loose to visit with each other and participate in the reunion activities. And we would like to recognize one other person, and this person.